Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello, hello. All right, hang on just 1 second here, folks. I got things out of order. Believe it or not, if I turn this on before I turn the microphone on, it doesn't work. Let's see if it works now. Welcome. Do we have sound yet? There. Oh my goodness. There we go. Test, 1, 2, 3. All right, we are here. Hello, my name's Dan. This is Daily Art Adventure number, I have to look myself, 843. Starting a large landscape with a grid. So you can already see the grid. Hello, Crystalline. Hello, well, Eric, you're a new guy. Hello, Monique. Good evening to you. So I've already drawn a grid on this 36 by 62 inch canvas. There's my reference down there, a photograph that I took, and then in Photoshop a little while ago I put a grid on it, and it's the same ratio, of course, as the canvas. So this, as you regulars can imagine, this is not my preferred method of starting a painting, because I would much rather start a painting by literally throwing paint around and making all kinds of abstract marks, right? As I usually do. So why am I not doing that right now? I'm so glad you asked that question. It's quite simple, because that does not feel right to me for some reason. I'm going to continue, even though maybe my intuition is off. I don't know. Forgive me, I'm having to think too hard. I'm not talking because I'm trying to think. A dangerous proposition, to be sure. I am not starting with a splash. I'm going to do that later. So I'm going to do things not in my usual order. And again, the reason for that is because the canvas is just large enough that I'm copping out, to use the colloquial of my generation. I don't know if people still say copping out or not. I don't even know what the etymology of that word is, but anyway, it sounds a little suspicious, doesn't it? Because the canvas is so large, therefore, the drawing difficulties are magnified, quite simply magnified or exacerbated by the size of the canvas. And I can either spend a lot of extra time fussing and fuming and struggling to get the drawing correct, or I can do what many, perhaps of you or many people do with every painting, which is do a grid from the beginning. The question can certainly be rightly asked, because usually I rant and rave, if you will. I rant against using a grid, because your drawing skills deteriorate when when you use this kind of cheating technique. So I first of all, I plead guilty to that accusation. Someone could say to me, well, you're not being very consistent. Most of the time you say we shouldn't grid, and here you are gridding. First of all, guilty as charged. And then I'll explain a little bit. So why am I doing it? Well, partly because I make a living. Let me put it this way. Partly because I'm trying to make a living as an artist. So we just leave it at that. I'm trying to make a living as an artist. And hang on just a second again. Once again, I'm having to think too hard. Let me interrupt my talking to think hard. So being able to produce a painting in a timely manner is really critical. This is not a hobby. I've got a mortgage to pay. I've got groceries to buy and health insurance to pay for, and et cetera, ad nauseum. So, yep, I'm just going to cheat. That's just all I'm going to do, because you can get the job done more quickly when you cheat. So why do I allow myself to cheat, but I won't let you guys do it? You know what I mean by won't let you. I have no control over you, as you know. But, and the reason is because most of the time I'm trying to teach people, presumably most of whom are not as far along in their art or painting journey as I am. Most of the time I'm trying to teach people how to become good artists. And one of my answers, one of my broad categorical imperatives, that sounds very philosophical now. One of my common instructions is, if you're learning how to become a better artist, don't cheat. Don't use cheater techniques. Does that make sense? So at the moment, I'm cheating just because it's like, oh, doggone it, I've got to get this thing done. And that is really the way I feel. I am in a hurry to finish this painting. All right, enough of that. So this canvas is, as I said earlier, 36 by 72, so 3 feet by 6 feet, exactly 1:2 ratio. This is a commission. Again, there's the photograph that I took and edited. And yeah, Uncle's mini canvas. And but I'll reiterate, I guess, looking at your chats. Yeah, you guys got it. I'm not starting the way I'd like to, truly. But again, because of time constraints, I'm just going to take the quick method. By the way, those 2 lines right there are the lower one is a mistake. Someone, Snoozer, just made a brilliant comment. I didn't read the whole thing, but something about the difference between a beginner and a hobbyist and someone who's doing it. Yeah, I think I caught the gist of it. I'll look again in a minute. Let me zoom in here for just a second and talk about my grid. A couple of things that might be instructive. So if you are going to cheat, at least cheat well. Okay, so here's one of the tricks that I use. Again, here's my photograph. I'm sorry you can't see it really well because of the light in here. Hang on, there we go. All right, you'll notice that there are both red lines and blue lines corresponding to red and blue lines on my canvas. If they were all red or all blue or all black, or whatever, it's much easier to get mixed up. So I use 2 colors. I mean, 3 colors would make it even easier. Any of you who have ever done a grid before have no doubt discovered that it doesn't fix everything. It does not, by any means, does not solve all your problems. Not by a long shot. It's still real easy to mess up. Let me repeat that. It's still really easy to mess up, even when you're using a grid. Now, I started to point out a few minutes ago, these two lines down here, this one is a mistake. Yea, verily, as they said 300 years ago. This one might be a mistake also, but I think this one's closer than this one. So turns out I'm not even having to, mess up on purpose. I've talked to you guys often about how I like the mess ups in my drawings because they create a visual jitter that is useful in the later stages of the painting process. In other words, you draw a line, it's in the wrong place, then you draw another one, it's in the right place. Now you've got two lines instead of one, and I have more than that by the time I'm finished. But that jitter, iterative stop and start of the drawing, false drawing mixed in with correct drawing and so forth, is actually helpful in the later stages because it creates an attractive texture in the painting. I'm just going to leave it at that right now. I could explain it more, but that's good enough. So I'm getting jitter here, whether I want to or not. Okay, now I was going to, a few minutes ago, I started to talk about the grid, and I showed you one trick. Trick number one is that I do it in two colors. That's a big help. I do the same thing like whenever I do a grid for a wedding painting, which, by the way, I've gotten away from that lately. I have not been doing nearly as many. I've not been using a grid in my wedding paintings nearly as often as I was, say, a year ago. I don't know if that's a temporary trend or a permanent trend. I have no idea. It's not my job to know whether trends are permanent or temporary. Just my job to keep on trying to get better. But anyway, I do use, when I do grids, like for a wedding portrait, I do indeed, hang on, I need to think again. I do indeed use two color, and sometimes three colors actually. And I use like red and green, red and blue like this, and then diagonals that are white, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The other thing I want to point out is up here where you can see, after having drawn all these lines with a T-square and a ruler, just plain old-fashioned, gut it out, no secrets, no tricks, just plain old-fashioned measure and draw. Nothing magical. Just precision, that's all, just plain old-fashioned precision. But once I finished all that, I actually came in here, and you'll see divided up. Well, I started here, so I'll show you here first. I came into my, am I on the camera? Yep. And by hand, just by eyeball, scratched a plus sign in the middle of several of these squares along these buildings. And then, again, just by eye, I did the same thing here on my canvas. Because I discovered after I finished the grid and looked at it, I said, you know what? That's not enough detail. I need more detail than that. So again, so there's two tricks for making your grid better. One, use two colors. Two, supplement it even by eye, if you will. I'm redrawing already things that I did just a few minutes ago, and now I'm thinking, wait a minute, I need to move this or that. I said a while ago, those of you who have done a grid, you're groaning or laughing with me right now when I say a grid is not a panacea. Now, I suppose you could you could grid this down like to 2-inch squares, then it'd be hundreds of squares. And indeed, you could do that, indeed, and probably some of you have. But then what you discover is if you do something, you literally have to number 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, and you have to number them on your picture, because when you get really, really, really fine grid, what's the danger then? You completely lose track of where you are. And I know it sounds stupid, but you really do. You wouldn't think, at least I would think, well, surely I can keep track of where I am. And the answer is, surely you don't. I mean, it takes some real concentration, I'll just put it that way, to keep track of where you are. So this is sort of a compromise. Red and green, and then little, just by eye, just estimating the middle of each of those squares up there. All right, and I'm already I'm pretty pretty confused. I can't find myself here. Okay, there's a big dark mark right there. So I will again, no surprise to you regulars, where am I going to go from here? I'm probably going to draw this in paint one time, and then probably, I barely squeezed that word out, didn't I? Then probably, because I'm not sure, but probably after that, draw it again in pencil. And then I will oh, good grief. I just discovered a big mistake, but I don't know where the mistake is. Oh, hang on. Okay, it's not as bad as I thought. Whew. Gotta move this line over a little bit. Now I'm going to do something I usually recommend not doing. Again, because the jitter, the mistakes, help in the finished drawing. But then there's a countervening rule, right? And that is, if you literally can't tell which is the right correct mark, then sometimes it helps just to go ahead and, quote, erase it, so to speak. So that's what I just did right there. I just erased with white. Paint. Really, sometimes I really can't talk. I really can't talk and paint at the same time. It's so funny. Just a word about the color that I'm using. My brushes are a mess. I have basically red, cool red, magenta or quinacridone, something like that, and violet on my brushes. I'm going back and forth. But generally speaking, the goal is to draw in a color that does not coincide with the actual color of the image. Does that make sense? I want contrast to the image. I don't want it to get lost. I don't want it to be realistic color. I want it contrary or contrasting color to the real image. I started to say a few minutes ago that after I draw this in pencil, I will probably come in here and draw it. No, Sorry, see, I'm trying to paint and my brain's working too hard. I'm stumbling all over myself. Now, I'm going to draw in ink, draw in paint, then draw in pencil, and then I will do my wild and crazy abstract on top of this drawing. Okay, just to let you know where I'm going, especially because I don't know if I'm going to broadcast that long. Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. Right at the moment, my brain is saying to myself, so you call this easy? I am straining. Even with the grid in place, I'm straining to get the drawing correct. And I actually know why I'm straining. I'm going to tell it to you because it's I've taught this before, but this is exactly what I'm struggling with right now, and just it helps me to keep this struggle clear in my mind. Okay, here it is. Here's why I'm having trouble. Oh, you guys, some great chats. Yeah, okay, Thinker 888, I just answered that question, right? I'm going to do the big swooshes of color second instead of first. All right, let me tell you why my mind is struggling to get this drawing correct, even though I've got a grid, for goodness sake, right? I've got a grid right here on the photograph. And I've got a grid on the, what could be easier? What could possibly be easier? Well, I'm going to tell you why it's not as easy as it looks. As soon as I figure out what is the latest mistake that I just made. Ha! Good grief. Maybe I'm just losing it mentally and I don't know it. Early stage Alzheimer's. I rebuke that thought. I feel rather half-witted at the moment. All right, let me tell you why I'm having such a hard time, and you would have the same hard time. There's a little-known secret that artists have to struggle with all the time, and it's really what is rising up and biting me in the butt right now, and it is this: that our eyeballs. And I don't literally mean our eyeballs, I more literally mean the seeing part of our brain, the seeing part of our mind, but I'm going to call it our eyeballs, since I'm talking about the seeing part of our mind. Our eyeballs have a telephoto lens built right into them. Yep, I know, it's hard to believe. You never knew that before, unless you've listen to me or some other teacher teach you the same thing. I've never heard anybody else teach this. This is just something I've discovered, my own difficulties. All right, but I know that it's true. There's no question in my mind that it's true. Here it is. We have telephoto lens built into our brains, our eyeballs. I'll show you the photograph for a moment. So, as you can imagine, my mind, my focus, my eye is crawling along, all of these shapes as I'm drawing them, as I'm painting them, right? I'm using the center focus, 1-2% of my visual field to look at something. What happens is, and this, it's brilliant the way literally brilliant the way our eyes are invented, designed, that we have this function. Because essentially what happens is anything that we're focusing on, giving our full, careful attention to with our eyeballs, that object grows like a telescope. It gets bigger in our mind, not in our literal eye, of course, but in our mind, that object grows larger. And this is a great help to all the rest of life because, again, you're driving down the freeway at 80 miles an hour and you want to look ahead at an exit sign that's approaching, what do? I mean, you might even scrunch up your nose a little bit, you know, adjust your glasses if you're over 40 something, and you tilt your head and you squint and you look really carefully at that sign that's a quarter of a mile down the road ahead of you, or half a mile or something, right? And having done that, you discover that you actually have the capacity then to read that sign. Whereas a few seconds before, when you were just driving down the freeway at 80 miles an hour, you couldn't read that sign. Why? Because you weren't focused on it, because you weren't looking at it carefully. In other words, we tend to see in a very global fashion most of the time. We just see everything in our field of vision. Whoops, sorry, I went off camera there for a minute, didn't I? Does that make sense? So most of the time we're seeing big, but every once in a while we need to see small for some particular reason. I certainly can imagine if this feature, this characteristic of our brain being very helpful in hunting, gathering, in shooting game, in shooting food out in the savannah or the forest or whatever it may have been. You know, we're looking, or staying alive, we're looking at, I think a lion just ducked behind that tuft of grass down there. Well, you can be sure that we're going to, the expression that we often use is peel our eyes, right? Peel our eyes. That expression refers to, I think, this very phenomenon of staring very carefully at one small point. So it's not hard to imagine then that if you do that, that small point in essence grows, not literally, but grows in our estimation, in our attention. All right, now, what does that have to do with being an artist? The answer is quite a lot, because what happens as an artist is as I am here staring at this bit and that bit, this little bits and pieces of this photograph that's beneath me here on the easel, and I stare at it really carefully. Whatever it is I'm staring at grows, gets bigger in my mind. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Because then, once you realize that phenomenon is happening, then you can try to go, oh, wait a minute, I need to be careful. I think every elementary school or middle school artist has experienced this. Let's say you're drawing a face on a piece of paper, and the middle school artist maybe starts with a nose. He or she thinks the nose is the correct size. And then he draws an eye and a mouth and a forehead and a cheek and lips and a chin, and next thing you know, the person's head is spilling off the sides of the page, because without realizing it, the student actually drew a nose that was too large for the face and for the head. And that difficulty, as I am proving here amply, is not at all limited to middle school artists. It's exactly what's happening to me. Like when I first started this painting a few minutes ago, and this triangle at the top of this building, staring at it in the photograph, I would have, if I didn't have a grid, I would have drawn that. I would have drawn that thing about this big. I'm not kidding. That's how big I would have drawn it. And look, but the grid kept forcing me, like, no, it's smaller, smaller, smaller. So that's just a classic example. And what am I going to do with those false lines? The answer is nothing. They're just going to become part of the happy noise of the painting as it proceeds. One, two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. So considering how much trouble I'm having getting this thing drawn, even with the cheating, I am fully persuaded my decision to cheat was was the right one. I'm having plenty of trouble as it is without trying to do it by eye. And again, I repeat it. It's not as much fun for me to do it this way. But at the moment, my goal is not to have fun. At the moment, I have an overriding goal. It's called pay the mortgage. So I can't spend a week on this painting. I hope I don't spend a week. My goodness. I'm going to be collecting money in a week. Do you understand? And that's just part of, I guess, probably most of you, I'm guessing, most of you, that is not the case. By the way, that is part of the reason why amateur, since I'm on that subject, since I came into it tangentially, that in fact is part of the reason. So all those of you who don't make your living or make money or much money at your art, I'm going to give you good news and bad news. The bad news is that's why you're not very good at art. Okay, now the good news is with this one minor tweak, you can get better. Okay, so that was very harsh. Forgive me, but no, I'm telling you the truth, and it's for your own good. I have observed this many times over the decades. People whose art is their hobby, they give themselves all the time in the world to finish a painting. And that time is their enemy. I've used that expression a lot. If everything you apply to your canvas aids similitude, realism, accuracy, detail, then time is your enemy. I've used that expression that way many times. And a corollary to that is, if you give yourself, we have noise happening, let me fix that. If you give yourself all the time you want, all the time you feel like you need to do a painting, you're doing yourself a disservice. You should put yourself, so to speak, and I don't mean this literally, but figuratively, you should put yourself on a clock and say, I'm going to give myself something reasonable, 3 days, say. Only 3 days, whichever, if it's 3 in a row, or if it's 1 day each week for 3, whichever the case may be. You generally speaking, and of course I can hear most of you saying, no, that won't make me a better artist, that'll make me worse. And again, I rest my case. No. That's what you think, but that's where you're wrong. Because the fact is, being in a hurry will actually make you paint better. And you can say to me, well, is that true of you? And the answer is, heck yeah. In fact, I just watched a video of mine, because I'm building a new website, by the way. It's weddingpainter.com. I'm very excited to finally own this domain, weddingpainter.com. Up until now, some crazy photographer owned it, and I had to pay a whole lot of money to get it. Gag. But it's the first time in my life, actually, I took out a loan for a 100% business investment. So I'm just hoping, gambling, in a business sense of the word, gambling, that it will pay off. Anyway, so I'm rebuilding, so I'm building, and actually paying somebody to do it for me. I'm building first time I've ever paid somebody to build a website for me, too. All my websites up to this point I've done myself, but this time I said, nah. I'm going to pay somebody else to do it and get it done right. Anyway, so I watched a video because we're going to put it on the new website. And in that video, I'm doing a wedding painting, and I say I learned many years ago that I actually paint better when I'm in a hurry. I paint better when I'm under pressure. So this is what I'm telling you guys. I think all of us, pretty much all of us, we paint better if we're in a hurry, on a deadline, under pressure. In my case, I paint better with an audience. Now, all of this, of course, serves me very well in my live event painting. So my career has followed my strengths. But I'm not the only one. of whom that is true. Almost everybody listening to my voice right now, you would paint better if you painted faster, if you gave yourself less time. And I know Barbara was on a little while ago, and someone at Barbara's level might be the exception. But the fact is, Barbara, I don't know if you're still watching or not, but the fact is Barbara paints pretty quickly. Don't you? Yes, she does. You can tell by the frequency of her posting, and you can tell by the nature of her paintings. So anyway, there you go. That tip right there was worth the price of admission for somebody. How much did you pay for admission anyway? Oh yeah, nothing. Okay, so it might be exactly what it's worth. Nothing. Don't worry. I understand where I fit into the grand scheme of things. The answer is barely. But we have fun, don't we? And that's the important thing. Once my mortgage is paid, that's the important thing. Oh man, I continue to mess up here. This is just getting embarrassing. Okay, there's a red line right here, and there's a dark side of a building. Oh. Okay, and I am going to end this broadcast shortly because I'm messing up so badly, and frankly, it's all your guys' fault. You knew that was coming, didn't you? Oh, sure, he's going to blame us. Yep, there he went. I knew it was coming. No, honestly, it's more because I think this is going to get boring here because I've got a lot of... So I'm going to take a break. I will end this broadcast. I've done what I said I was going to do, which is starting a painting using a grid. And that's what I talked about. I'm going to finish drawing with brushes. And then I'm going to redraw the whole thing with pencils. And then maybe I'll bring you guys in and start broadcasting again. We'll see. But in the meantime, it has been fun having you here. Let me see what other chats. Oh, Thinker888, where'd you get those long handle brushes? That's a good question. Bring on the swooshes. I love it. I agree. I miss them. Oh, long-handled brushes. These were distributed by Jerry's Artorama. You hear me talk about Jerry's a lot. Great art supply chain. They moved their headquarters from Manhattan to Raleigh, North Carolina about 25 years ago. And then sometime after that, they and I connected on a very significant level. And I've just done a lot of work, mostly in arts, mostly in the video, making videos for them. And some of you, in fact, that's where you maybe discovered me, was on Jerry's Artorama videos. There's some reason I was saying that. Oh, long-handled brushes. But they don't make these anymore, alas. Oh, I don't think they make them. You could check. They are called, need to find one that doesn't have everything written off. Jewel, spelled in the traditional manner. Jewel Plein Air, like one word, Pleinaire. Misspelled, so Plein Air, misspelled. Jewel Plein Air. Google that and see if they come up with the brushes. I haven't bought any from them for several years because they told me they were discontinuing them, and I went into the store and bought about 40 of them, and I already owned about 60, so I own 100 of them. But they're wearing out, of course, especially the way I abuse brushes. Anybody who paints in acrylics abuses brushes, by the way. Acrylics are terrible on brushes. Okay, the next point, though. Long handle brushes, Rosemary, the Rosemary Brush Company, and I believe they're out of the UK. I own one. They gave me one at a conference a couple years ago, and it was a good brush. I've worn the heck out of it, and I don't know where it is. I think it's worn out. But anyway, you can check on Rosemary Brushes, and they sell actually better quality than these long-handled brushes. So when these wear out, that's where I'm planning to go. That's where I'm planning to go to buy my next batch. Okay, anything else? Snoozer, saying a lot of things. Good for you. Thank you very much. And yes, you're correct. I mean, my drawing steps come in many, many, many steps, not just two. So I'm just talking about the first two at the moment. First with brushes, second with pencils. When you paint a city like that, I don't find use grids cheating at all because the buildings are made with cold and boring calculations. Yeah, that's true. It is a rather, you know, they're squarish shapes to begin with. So. And Thomas Minnick says, website will always be worth it. It's easy to make judgments about a business when they have a poorly made website. Yeah, that's true. Correct. I hope so. I certainly hope you're right, Thomas. Thank you. Yeah, Barbara is still watching. Glad I said something nice about you a little while ago, Barbara. Glad to know you were here. I would have said it even if you hadn't been, but hang on, I'm going to draw just a little bit more before I leave you guys. So I'm going to leave you primarily because I think that what I'm doing is just too monotonous. And I can't think of enough clever things to say. Not that that ever stops me. You understand? Not having anything to say doesn't stop me from saying it, as you know right well. Oh man. Oh. I don't know if I should say anything about this or not. Too late. But last week, one day when I was broadcasting, I'm not even sure what I said, but evidently I said something that just really triggered a couple people, one person in particular. And oh my goodness, he was mad at me. I don't know how many of you read that chat. I'm not going to respond to it at all. I don't need to dignify it with a response, but he just went all political on me because he thought I went political on him because I had made comments about Obamacare and what a disaster it was for me. And to take from that, anyway, I will tell you, I loved Barack Obama. Now, that doesn't mean I agreed with him completely, but I had complete, whatever, I don't know what the word is. I was a big cheering fan of his. I really was. So when I said bad things about Obamacare, I was just telling you the truth. Anyway, but this person, evidently, he went real leftist on me, and just went off on me and everything I said. And you know, anybody that's listening, you could take, because I'm rambling, you could tell the way I'm talking, right? I'm talking not in a careful, politically correct way. I'm just rambling, and you could take everything I say and twist it, which he did. But now there was some reason I said that. I forget now what it was. It wasn't just to complain, but I said just because I don't have anything to say doesn't mean doesn't stop me from saying it. That's basically where I was going with that, as you know right well. And be careful of making assumptions. Oh, okay, I'll finish with this one story. I actually told this story to my two oldest grandchildren the other night. I heard it years ago from somebody, I can't remember who, but just to make a point. And this is a point that I need to remember as well. But here it is. I want to tell you a fictitious story to make a point, all right? So Mark and Jennifer were going down the street. You could tell just by looking at Mark that he was completely besotted. He was absolutely head over heels in love with Jennifer. These names are fictitious, of course. And he leaned over and brushed her cheek with his finger. She chuckled a little bit and blushed. He said, "Jennifer, I love you so much. I love you so much. I'm yours for the rest of my life. I will do everything I can to take care of you. I love you so much. You're beautiful. You're the light of my life, the apple of my eye, my north star, my blah, blah, blah." I'm not good at telling the story. You can tell that. And he reaches over and plants a kiss on her cheek, whereupon she lets out a blood-curdling scream, slaps him across the face as hard as she can, knocks his glasses to the ground, looks down at the glasses, and busts out laughing. Now, can anybody tell me what's going on in this story? The answer is no, unless you're one of those something strange geniuses. You have no idea. Every picture that you just had in your mind was erroneous. So you're missing one tiny detail. You with it? You ready for it? You're missing one tiny detail. Mark was a 30-year-old father. Jennifer was his 8-month-old baby. What does that do to the story and the storyline you just had in your head? The answer completely rewrites the entire story. Because you were picturing a young couple in love. Turns out it is. So the reason I tell that story is because we all need to remember that we never know the whole story. And we think we do. We construct things in our mind and falsely think that we're making judgments. And I'm going to go back to my critic who went all leftist on me the other day, because he or she was trying to make the point that I was a rich person. And the evidence for that was because, and I'm not here to criticize this person. My point is I can make the same stupid mistakes that they made. Oh, it was stupid, all right. But so the evidence that they had for why I was rich was because I also mentioned in the same broadcast, because I was complaining about, not being wealthy and so on and so forth, and that's why the Obamacare insurance was terrible for us, and we got out of it, went in another direction. But in the same conversation, I mentioned that I had been to Paris twice. So I give you my Mark and Jennifer story. So if you hear someone say, "Oh, I've been to Paris twice," what do you assume? You assume that they're fairly wealthy. In fact, normally when I say I've been to Paris, I've actually been to Paris 3 times. And then usually I joke and say something like, "I'm sounding like quite the jet setter, aren't I?" I've said that more than one time on my broadcast. So this person took from that little detail, "See, you're one of those rich, white, blah, blah, blah people." When in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. And I am not going to tell you how I went to France 3 times, but I am going to tell you that I didn't pay for a single one of them. In each case, my way was paid, and I was going because of my various and sundry competencies, gifts, and abilities, and contributions to society. My way was paid by other people because of what I could do for them when I went to France. So how many times have I been to France on my own bill? The answer is 0. I have a brother who's lived in Japan for 40 years, and I have not been to visit him one time, much to my chagrin. Not my shame, just my chagrin, because I would desperately like to visit my brother. He always comes here, I never go there. And one could read that and say, "Well, you don't like your brother very much, do you?" Nothing could be farther from the truth. But the fact is, I can't afford to go see him. At least I have never been able to yet. Anyway, and maybe I'm missing something. Oh, it's always possible, because I'm an incompetent clod, just like the rest of you. I just admit it. Anyway, so I'll leave with that. So the lesson is, Be careful how you judge. And I'm saying that to myself. I'm not here to castigate the person who went off on me. It was just a reminder. It's like, oh, you know what? I bet you I do the same thing to other people. So I'm going to be careful not to do that. All right. Snoozer. He was the Obama bodyguard. Oh my goodness. But I am telling you the truth that when Barack Obama was, like many, I think like millions of other white Americans, I was thrilled that we had a black man as president. I really was. And then I had a kind of compassion for him that went beyond, you know, mere normal political stuff. I really did. And in some sense still do, although he's not president anymore, so it's kind of a moot point. Got it? Anyway, so, but Obamacare was a disaster, in spite of that, in spite of how I felt about the progenitor of the healthcare system that bears his name. It didn't work for us at all. And Uncle gave me a few tips about how to make it work, but there must be a difference between me and Uncle. He's good at money and I'm not. That's, Uncle, probably why you had a real job and I've never had one of those. Okay, now I digress and I'm being completely silly. But there is the beginning of a painting. So I am going to quit. I'm going to keep painting, but I'm going to stop broadcasting. I enjoy your company, as you can tell, immensely. I'd rather paint with you guys than without you. And again, I can't even explain that. And as I've said at other times, I'm actually an introvert. I can't even explain that. I know I'm an introvert. I could go on and explain why, but I like your company. All right, thanks for watching. I might be back later tonight, or I might not. I don't know, but stay tuned. If you've clicked on the bell, then of course, as you know, you'll be notified. I never say this, virtually never, but give me a thumbs up if you like what I do. If you don't like what I do, just turn me off and don't give me a thumbs down. I'm kidding. Thumb away. By the way, where's David Mercer been? David, are you out there somewhere? We've been missing David. I hope he's okay. I hope I didn't say something. Me of the flapping lips. Ready, shoot, aim. Shoot, ready, aim. That's the way I talk, right? That's my shtick, and it's not going to change. All right, love you guys. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.